CARES is the intersection of the profit and nonprofit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. Well, it was pre-pandemic when we first encountered our dynamic guest today. He was leading Teach for America here in Kansas City, being innovative, bringing equity across the educational environment in the entire metro. Then an opportunity came, and Chris Rosson couldn't resist. It was Come to United Way. And we got to talk to Chris, and it was pandemic, and it was crazy, and we were on Zoom, and it was just amazing we could even get connected. But here we are. You've been here a little bit of the way for a while. Let's talk about the Mr. Changemaker and Mr. Innovator. Bring us up to speed on all things United Way.
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Ruth. I always love getting the opportunity to talk with you and talk about all things change and possibility in our community. We have been busy. You're right that I arrived at, I think, a very opportune time is what I would say. I think collectively the pandemic and the racial reckoning and everything that we saw happening over the last 24 months plus really sort of called upon all of us to recognize that we needed to think about things differently, we need to do things differently, and we need to be more responsive and agile to what were now community needs that could change on a dime. And I think one thing that became very clear to us was that we needed to find a way to galvanize around community needs issues in a more collaborative way, but also to make resources available and more reactive to how community need is changing in real time. And so we've done a few things. We have launched our new primary grant-making channel, which is Impact 100. And so it is a collection of organizations where every year we identify the 100 organizations in our community, nonprofit organizations that we believe are driving the highest impact against where community need lives today, right now, in real time. And we know that's ever changing. And so that's an annual cycle. We publish an annual list. We take it very seriously. It's a very rigorous effort on our part. And we believe it's a really reflective list of organizations that are driving impact. The second thing is, of course, in 211, we just, during the pandemic, we really found 211 to be that almost like the canary in the coal mine, where we were able to see community needs spike in certain areas, in particular around housing insecurity and food insecurity. I think the last time we talked, I shared that while there were lots of resources and efforts being put into the here and now pandemic response, that I had a real concern, and we were monitoring sort of the long tail implication of COVID and what that would do in our community. And that's certainly something that we've been able to leverage 211 to mine for data, to see how those trends are emerging, to see how they change, and to make sure that we're getting out in front as much as possible in our community. And then with that, we've taken on and continued on with a few strategic initiatives, including a very large one around eviction. And so eviction prevention initiative that's been going on for nearly 2 years now. And again, tied to sort of pandemic-related effects that we continue to monitor and make sure that we're addressing holistically as a community.
Impact 100. Talk about the nuts and bolts of that and how those different nonprofits were chosen and why they were chosen.
Well, so we have for quite a while continued to focus on the issues of health, education, and income, financial stability, really as key drivers in transforming lives throughout our community. And that had been the case for some time. However, from a grant-making standpoint, we had tended to go toward longer-term grants. And I think, again, just looking at the pandemic and looking at how quickly community need changed and shifted on a dime, I just felt it was very important for us as an organization to be agile in our response and to be nimble when it came to addressing those needs, and to really take a stance of rigor and really in some ways be a bellwether to the community about organizations that are driving impact. It is a big, difficult task. I think when we talked before, I had shared that over the last 10 years, we've grown in our region from 500 registered nonprofits to over 10,000. That is a monumental amount of growth, and that continues to increase. People are finding all sorts of ways to get connected to causes, and people are starting new organizations all the time. And I think, for us as an organization, it became very important to make sure that we were still being that bellwether in our community of organizations that were really high impact, really rigorous about outcomes, and really driving a meaningful, measurable difference against those points of data that we look at in those areas of health, education, and income. And so it's a rigorous process. We accept applications widely. We encourage organizations to apply. If there's somebody listening and they're an organization that would consider applying, they should do so. We're about to launch or announce our latest list here in the spring, summer timeframe, and so be on the lookout for that. But it is, I think, for us, an ability to not only drive dollars to those organizations, but to draw eyeballs, attention, volunteerism, awareness of some of these organizations. And again, when you look at that list, you will find organizations on that list that are household names that people would know, and you'll find a whole host of organizations that you never heard of and you had no idea existed, but are really driving incredible outcomes in our community.
So if you made the Impact 100 the first time around, you are not precluded from reapplying.
No, not at all. You're not precluded from applying. You can certainly apply again, but there's no guarantee that you'll make it back on that list, right? It is a dynamic list, and it is really rooted in where community need lives at this moment in time.
I know one thing we talked about the first time we had a conversation when you started at the very beginning of United Way. I said to you, there are some organizations that say, "Oh, my United Way grant. It's so long, it takes me forever." How have you addressed that? Have things changed there?
Yeah, they have. We really streamlined the application process for funds like Impact 100. We've committed, as far as I'm aware, we're the largest and the first major philanthropic entity here in Kansas City, a big funder, to completely adopt the trust-based philanthropy principles. And so, part of that is ensuring that we have a low barrier to entry in terms of access, that we're not making that process extra cumbersome on folks that are already doing great, meaningful work. I want organizations that are applying for funding and applying to partner with us to spend as much effort as possible driving mission and as little effort as required doing administrative tasks like applying for these sorts of things. And so we do try to make it streamlined and easy, but we do take a high bar in terms of the types of quality of inputs that we get from that process. But that was definitely a point of feedback that I heard and something that I wanted to address, and something that, as somebody who ran an organization that would have been eligible for funding like that in the past, it was important for me to make sure that was a streamlined process as well.
Trust-based philanthropy. I'm not sure I've heard that buzzing out there. How would you define that?
Well, I think trust-based philanthropy really puts the ownership on the grant maker to take a rigorous stance in looking into what makes an organization tick, what's driving their mission, and to really be relational, I think, more than anything. It is acknowledging that there's an inherent power dynamic at play when there's somebody holding on to funding and somebody who's requesting funding. And it's acknowledging both the complexities and the dynamics of that while simultaneously saying we're partners in this, and the expectation is not that the organization is perfect. The expectation is that the organization is making progress on an ongoing basis, and that we're really partners in that. We're coaches in that. We provide feedback, we provide connection, and we provide opportunities to get funding, but not in a way that is punitive or overly rigorous. It's intended to make the funding accessible, and the partnership really a true comprehensive partnership.
That's sea change. That's really sea change, I think, for folks who maybe have been in this community and used to the old way of doing things at United Way versus the new way. Collaboration is huge. You're a collaborator. You've got lots of energy. That's kind of your vision. So how have you been able, as you're leading United Way, to bring that in and move things forward?
Well, it's in our name, United Way, right? I think about, I was at the Chiefs game. We got a lot of excitement around here around the Chiefs, and I think about the fact that how powerful we are as a crowd, and how involved we get into the game when we all elevate our voices together. And so collaboration is absolutely critical if you're trying to move something at scale. And with the types of challenges we're taking on and really transforming the community by transforming individual lives and the lives of families in our community that are facing hardship, that takes a community effort. It really takes a village. And so a lot of our efforts are rooted in not the transactional, just sort of here's some funding, go do what you, but really getting grounded together in the challenges, getting grounded together in the solutions, and bringing all perspectives and voices to the table to try to address those.
Well, you mentioned the issue of housing, unhoused, people who face temporary housing, et cetera. How do you do that? It's such a big challenge. And it's across ages, too. I think that sometimes people don't realize it's just, families with children or a single. I've now been hearing about terrible issues with older adults who can't find affordable housing.
Yeah.
So how do you tackle that huge issue?
Yeah, it is a huge issue, and it's one of those things. We talked about the long tail implication of COVID. It's one of those things that we were early on just sort of aware of. We were getting an influx of calls in 211 that were, and we still right now, we get over 100 calls a day from families who are facing housing insecurity, families who are somewhere in either the eviction process or recognize that they can't pay their bills and are in a situation where they really need some support and some help. To this point about collaboration, we've taken a collaborative approach to addressing that and a proactive approach to addressing that. We worked with a variety of legal aid partners, both at UMKC Law School as well as the Heartland Center, and as well as about 30 or so social service agencies throughout the community. And collectively, we've been able to advocate for around $25 million in both federal resources as well as pooling private resources together and taking on what we call the Eviction Prevention Initiative. And it's really trying to address the issue of homelessness and housing insecurity before a family is facing eviction, before a family is being kicked out of their homes and having to look to a shelter, which are already facing really constraints. And I'm pleased to say that through that effort, in some cases we're paying back rent, some cases we're helping people get up to current on their utility payments. In other cases, we're really standing with them in the courts process, and we're representing them through legal aid in the eviction courts process itself. And I'm proud to say that over that last 24 months, we've supported 75,000 people, kept them out of homelessness, wow. 25,000 families, 75,000 individuals in our community. I think, as you said, I think there's a misnomer and a misperception that folks that are facing that, these are folks that are maybe unemployed or facing other sorts of situations. But no, what we're seeing with inflation and with other things, we're seeing that actually about half of the folks that are coming to us making those calls, these are folks, working people who are employed, who are really doing the best they can. They're resilient, and they just need some support from their neighbors. And I'm just really glad that at United Way we get to be able to provide that support and be that friendly helping face whenever they face that moment of hardship.
How do the municipalities play with you?
We coordinate with them often, both in terms of social service delivery, but also in terms of making sure that funding is getting used and put in the most optimal places. So they are strong partners with us and all that, and that's really region-wide, county by county, the cities. I mean, it really is a collective effort.
Let's flip to 211. Been there for a while. Bring us up to speed on what it's doing and how that really makes a difference in the community to have that.
Yeah, so 211, for those who aren't aware, it's our community's resource and referral network. It is really the connective tissue of our nonprofit space. It's the connective tissue of our social service space. Really, in some ways, the connective tissue of our community. We have community resource navigators who stand by the ready on the phones 24/7, 365, over 150 languages spoken. And these are, and they really deserve a shout out. Our community resource navigators really deserve a shout out. I'm really grateful to the support that they provide our community. And these are folks who are answering calls when somebody in our community falls upon hard times. They don't know where to turn. They've got an unexpected medical bill that they can't afford. They're facing housing insecurity. They can't put food on the table, and they're not really sure where to turn in that sea of 10,000 plus nonprofits. Right. 211 becomes that place that they can call. They can speak to a friendly friend who will walk through, learn about their situation, and connect them. We have an over 90% success rate in connecting people with resources they need in the community. Oh, and then again, we also now are really doubling down on using it as a way to measure and sort of track emerging community needs. And so that sort of canary in the coal mine kind of approach. We certainly use it as an input to assessing and understanding community need and how it evolves. And I think that it's one of those resources in our community that needs to be talked about more, needs to be understood more. More people need to be aware of it. And I will say, when we talk about community need and measuring it, since 2018, we've seen an over 20% increase in call volume to 211, and that's a real indicator of the fact that we have real significant challenges that we're facing and need to address in our community.
They've got to be nice people with lots of patience, I would imagine, to sit there and listen to somebody else's woes, albeit very legitimate. Yeah.
But can I just say that they could be any of our woes, and I think that's
absolutely,
that's sort of the thing,
absolutely, and you've been there.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does your own background weigh into what you do here every day. And if you want to give a little recap in case someone missed the last time we talked.
Yeah. Well, so by way of background, I grew up here in Kansas City. I grew up in a low-income household. I grew up in one of our city's highest violent crime rate neighborhoods. I was the first person in my family to graduate high school, first person to go on and graduate college, and that lived experience is something that is a very present thing with me. It's something that it goes with me in every room and every conversation. And it really does inform every decision that I make here. When we're making decisions about programs to support, we're making decisions about resource allocation, or we're making decisions about initiatives to take on. We talk about these things at scale. I mean, we touch 1 in 3 people in the community every year. And so when that's the sort of scale that you're working with, sometimes it can be easy to fall into the prey of just looking at these in terms of numbers. But for me, what I know is that I was that kid on the other side of that equation. I was the person who was receiving those sorts of benefits. I benefited so directly from those things. And so that is a part of every conversation. And I think one thing that's important to note, I hear a lot of talk sort of in the community as I go out and about which sort of solution's better than the others. And when I look at my own life story, I didn't just need food pantry assistance. I didn't just need after-school programs. I didn't just need mentoring programs or free health clinic supports. I needed all of those things, and at different points along my journey. And one of the things I love about the approach we take here at United Way is that it is a comprehensive, holistic approach, community-based approach, and a really collective action approach to addressing, to transforming lives. I feel like, given my background and given the transformation that I've experienced firsthand, I've got the best job in the world. We get to change the world every day, one life at a time, and that is very meaningful and very personal work to me.
You have employees, obviously, teammates, associates, whatever the term is you want to use, that work here with you every day. Let's talk about lay leadership and the role of the rest of the community. How do they play into what United Way is doing?
Well, so that's really at the core, I think, of another role we play, which is to stoke that philanthropic flame. In fact, we often talk about our work now in terms of inspiring and enabling a local movement of change agents, or as we call them, waymakers. Waymakers. Because when I think about that path that I talked about, those opportunities were made possible. Those opportunities made all the difference in the world to me, and they were made possible by strangers who chipped in $1 where they could, who made an investment when they could, who volunteered their time, who gave of their expertise. And in order to sort of, I really believe that the business of changing the world, the business of transforming the community, is not any one organization or one individual's responsibility. It's all of our responsibilities. And so we more and more view our role as helping enable that and helping educate and help give people proximity to both the challenges and also the promising solutions that exist here in our community.
So what role is there for a volunteer? If they say, I'm all behind this, I'm all behind what Chris is saying, rah, rah, let's go. How do they get connected, help make some of those decisions or carry the mission?
Yeah, so I would say go to our website and follow us on social media. We post volunteer opportunities regularly. We also bank a resource bank where any nonprofit organization in the community can post volunteer opportunities, post needs, and that's a great place. I would say start anywhere. Start anywhere is the thing to do. And I think it also can be intimidating. If you're new to the space, and you're not really sure where to start, it can be intimidating, and we've tried to sort of ease that as well. We have a whole host of what we call immersion experiences, bus tours and educational opportunities where folks can go and visit organizations. They can learn about an issue, for instance, homelessness or education or early childhood education. They can learn about what are the issues related to that. They get proximate to some of the organizations making a difference in those spaces. And my hope is that they find their love and they find their passion. But whatever they do, I would just encourage folks to get involved, be an advocate, be educated, and do what you can, because we all can do something.
What have you found to be the greatest challenge, maybe challenges, we'll go with more than one if there is one, as you've settled in now, you've kind of gotten your team, although we know people go in and out. What's that challenge, and how have you tried to meet it?
The worst part about this job is that you're confronted every day with the challenges. We really have significant challenges in our community. And I think that one of the things that I find is that increasingly as a society we feel divided. Politics, economics, technology, increasingly puts us further and further in our silos, further and further tucked away from each other. And yet at the same time, I get so inspired. The best part of the job is I get so inspired. We see individuals and organizations throughout the community who are stepping up to address needs, stepping up to make a difference. And every day when those folks step up, they support a neighbor in need, they volunteer with an organization who's looking for help, they mentor a young person in their community. Every time those things happen, those are folks who are choosing a brighter future for all of us, choosing a collective future. They're choosing, whether they work with us or not, they are choosing a united way forward for all of us. And those really are the waymakers in our community. And so from a challenge standpoint, I would just say that keeping people's attention on these issues, when it's not facing you every day, when you're not growing up in that environment, when you're not sort of confronted with some of those real challenges, it can be a challenge to grab people's attention in such a cluttered world. But what I also see every day is that that's a challenge that's being met, particularly here in Kansas City by our community.
You've got some new things. Share and tell. You've got the Food Pantry Initiative. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm pleased to share that we just recently, we're just really, again, closely monitoring community need. What we know about inflation is that that's putting a pinch on everybody, and particularly organizations like women's shelters and organizations, Head Start centers, and organizations who are supporting youth and new American populations, particularly vulnerable populations, accessing certain needs and supports. And so in order to address that, we've partnered together with a few of our philanthropic partners. We've pooled community resources that have been donated to United Way. And I'm grateful to say that we've just recently awarded nearly $400,000 in additional food pantry assistance to about 30 organizations here in town who are providing food pantry assistance to folks in order to bolster up what they have. And what we've seen and heard from them is that they're seeing a 20% increase just because of inflation, a 20% increase in demand. And those are, again, many of them are working families. These are folks who are doing everything they can. They're pinching pennies, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they just need a little extra support from our community.
Right. And in the bio arena, you've got another new initiative, this Catalyst program you were telling me about.
Yes. I'm also really excited to share that we've partnered with the Kauffman Foundation, and we've created, in addition to the Impact 100 and other sort of grant initiatives that we have an opportunity for a Catalyst fund that is about $2.5 to $3 million over the next 3 years that collectively United Way and the Kauffman Foundation have committed to creating a Catalyst fund to support BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color led or primarily serving organizations in our community. In particular, we're looking at small nonprofits, organizations that may not have the time history or have had the access to capital or have had the access to networks that have been able to reach a certain degree of impact scale to be competitive for something like Impact 100, but we want to make sure that they have access to funds and resources that are fully dedicated and set aside to again catalyze the next generation of important nonprofits and community-rooted nonprofits in our community.
Probably the elephant in the room. How are contributions going? What have you seen? I mean, we were in the heat of the pandemic. We're now in pandemic 2 or whatever you want to call this new phase. How have you watched that happen, and how are you addressing it?
Well, our community continues to be incredibly generous with time, talent, and treasure. They continue to be generous, and we've certainly seen that. Companies are facing, as you said, through pandemic and other things, all sorts of disruptions in terms of workforce, and yet at the same time, I am just emboldened by the fact that our largest companies, individuals throughout our community, step up again year after year and understand that there are these real needs in our community that need to be addressed, and they continue to trust United Way with that. And so fundraising efforts have been strong. As you know, it can always be stronger. We always use more. But what I see though is that a real resiliency in the funding community as well, even in spaces where these same challenges that we talk about, food insecurity, inflation, some of these sorts of things, they affect all of us, and yet we still find folks who continue year after year to make giving and investing back in the community and a big part of their annual
And
experience.
stepping up when it's needed. All right, so let's take Chris's crystal ball now. Where do you envision United Way, let's say in 5 years from now? What do you see?
Well, in 5 years from now, I hope that we continue to just be really resilient and agile in terms of how we're addressing community need. I hope that as a community, we continue to build smarter and more sustainable solutions to addressing these challenges. You know, one of the things that gets asked of me often in public forums is, well, you guys have been in operation for 100 years.
Yeah.
You know, how, you know, why haven't we solved homelessness, or why haven't we solved educational inequity? And I often sort of think about the weather, right? We still have hurricanes, we still have earthquakes, we
Right.
still have these sorts of things. I can't think of any point in time in our history that we've not had issues of inequity, issues of haves and have-nots. We've not had issues of isms and tribalisms and all these sorts of things that happen. And yet we have to be smarter and more sophisticated in the solution set that we address those with. And some of the evolutions that we've talked about even today are our efforts to make sure that we are continuing to stay relevant. We're continuing to stay ahead of the curve in terms of addressing those things. And in the same way with the weather, right? We've gotten more sophisticated technology. We're not just ducking under a wall. You know, we're sort of doing all those sorts of things. And it's the same sort of thing in this space. And so yeah, I really view in many ways what we do at United Way, we're sort of a crowd-funded solutions engine for the community, right? And we need to be constantly sort of in the aggregate working together to build smarter and more sustainable solutions to these really pressing issues.
You've got 5 girls,
I do.
pretty young.
Yes.
How do you bring in the next generation? I'm not saying the 5 to 10-year-olds, little young, but the millennial, the Gen Z, the whatever you want to call it. Seems like that's always a challenge for nonprofits. So how are you all going about trying to get that buy-in and their involvement?
Well, we, you know, we have a, well, just one thing I will say on that, though, is that the younger generation, of which I still like to think I'm...
You're there. Some of us are in a little more mature generation.
The younger generation are incredibly idea-focused. They're incredibly issue-focused. We are the issues that we take on and we get involved with, we're very serious about, and I think they really lead with their heart in a lot of ways. And so we see that they are actively engaged and they want to continue to be engaged. We, of course, try to provide opportunities through those immersive experiences I talked about to make sure it's accessible to folks, and also fun. You know, I'm a big believer that you should have fun doing serious work, and I think that is part of what we see that we continue to try to infuse. And when we get together for volunteer gatherings, when we get together for donor gatherings, when we go on service experiences, that we try to ensure that it's also a fun experience. And I haven't met a younger person anywhere that's not interested in having a good time while they're doing it too. Yeah. And I would just say that they're also very, you know, there are a million ways that folks can get involved, a million ways to be united, a million ways to get involved, and that young people are really creative in terms of how they find ways to get involved. And a lot of the growth that we talked about in the nonprofit sector is being driven by young people who are saying, you know what, I think I have a different solution set that we can bring to the table, a different way of looking at that problem. And I think that's what gets me really excited and optimistic about the future.
Do you ever get any pushback from those folks that, well, this is the way we've always done it, or I have the wisdom because I've been here longer than you?
Of course, of course.
And so how do you do that? You tap dance, right?
No, we say, hey, well, tell us what you think, and let's talk about it, right? And I also think that, you know, I heard the other day that everyone collectively is smarter than anyone individually, and I think that we want all ideas at the table when we're doing that. You did mention though something that I want to bring up, which was that you talked about my little kiddos, right? And ensuring that they're getting involved. That's something that I think it's never too young to get involved. And actually we see young kids, you know, go to an elementary school and check out their food drive. Go to an elementary school and talk about and really the things that young people do. They're thinking creatively. They have a different perspective they're bringing to the table. And I don't think it's ever too young to get folks involved in shaping the community for the better.
Plus, they can learn the right way to do things instead of all the mistakes that we go through, right?
That's right. Build and iterate off the mistakes of the past, for sure.
Chris, it's been great to sit down with you. Thank you for bringing us up to speed. We expect great things moving forward and fun things moving forward.
That's right.
And everybody should check out United Way. Go ahead and give the plug on your website if you'd like.
Well, just check out United Way's, our website. Follow us on social. That's the best way to get in touch with us and stay up to date on all things in our community.
Thank you for tuning in to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We are glad to be sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. Don't forget, you can catch us Saturday mornings on ESPN 1510 and 94.5 FM. Thanks for joining us on Casey Cares.